Make sure you understand these rulings so that you don't lose any unnecessary games of Shadowverse Evolve. Hey everybody, it's Espira, and we're back with another Shadowverse Evolve video. This time going through a few rulings that should hopefully clarify a couple of things. I've been on the Discords and having discussions with newer players, and there's been a lot of misunderstandings about specifics about what applies to this game. And look, I get it. I come from other card games and I tend to apply the logic of other card games to newer card games I play. Sometimes it works out, it's a good base, but there are a couple intricacies that we do need to account for when we're talking about a brand new game. So with that said, I've decided to cover some of the questions I've seen prop up the most often. Nothing in terms of like the basic rules. I always recommend that if you're just picking up the game, guys, definitely go check out the official website on the how to play. And a lot of these questions are actually pulled from the FAQ. It's just a little bit more tied in, and some of them I didn't see in the FAQ, and I figured it'd be worth adding here. So with that said, we'll just jump right into it. And the biggest one that I get asked all the time: can you have life above 20? Is 20 a hard limit? And no, it is not. There is no limit to your life. It is just a base total, which means let's say you've got Lucifer on board and you're at 20 life at the end of the turn, you are going to prop up into a 24 health lead, which is super awesome. It just gives you that buffer, gives you that range. This is also applicable to followers. Followers have a base defense, but they don't have a max defense, which means if you stat them up, you buff them up. There's no like healing, but effectively you will be able to keep their stats going up and up and up. And we'll see a little bit more about that a little bit afterwards. So moving on from there, do buffs carry over to Evolve? And this is specifically what I was talking about with followers. Yes, all buffs and debuffs and damage, basically everything that was applicable to the base version of the card will be applied to the evolved version. So example here would be Ancient Elf. On play, gets to return a card on the board back to the hand, and that will give Ancient Elf +1/+1. On Evo, that means Ancient Elf would be a 4/4 instead of a 3/3, and then you get the on evolve, and then she becomes a 5/5, so on and so forth. So everything that was applicable to the base version tracks to the next version. And like I said, similar to the first ruling, there is no limit on how big or how small. Well, I mean, if you're at 0, you die, but there's no limit on how big or how small your power or your toughness can be. So make sure to track that. I definitely recommend getting some dice for this game because it is one of those things that because they're permanent, you're definitely going to want a good way to be able to keep track of those. Moving on from there, can I replace cards on a full board? So remember, your board can only have 5 followers, amulets, what have you, and your EX area can only have 5. And the answer to that is no. The moment you have 5 things on your board, so let's say I've got 5 fairies on my board, you cannot just swap them out or replace them. You're going to have to find a means to be able to clear up space on your board to play new things. So if you've got a follower, that means swinging a follower into their follower, maybe it dies, now you've cleared up a spot, or using an ability that will bring it back to your hand. Some way, somehow, you're going to have to clear up space before you can play cards. You cannot just hard swap cards out. Then 0 cards in deck. What happens? Well, you don't just flat out lose actually, but the moment that you have to draw a card, that is when you lose. So there's a couple of scenarios in which that'll happen. Of course, if you start the turn and then there's no cards in the deck and then you go to draw for the start of your turn, that will obviously cause you to lose. Alternatively, if for whatever reason you had no cards in deck and you use something like Trail of Light, at that point you will also lose because you are required to draw and you do not have a card left in your deck. I do like, however, that there's that window, right? It's not an automatic lose the moment your deck goes to 0. It means the last card in your deck matters. It means you'll have an opportunity to play it out. Is that fringe? Sure, at least until maybe we see a mill strategy, but just knowing that you at least have that freedom to draw your last card and make a couple of plays, and on the opponent side, maybe there's a cheeky way you can force your opponent to draw a card to make them lose. There's that kind of nice back and forth. I do really appreciate that the game doesn't just auto end, and it gives us an opportunity to be able to interact using the last card in our deck. Then when can I quick? And this is very specific because I've seen a lot of players kind of get this confused, and I'll break it down to a couple of aspects, but the most bare bones definition is you can quick after an opponent attack or at the end of an opponent's turn, and it's a very specific window that's after skills resolve. So it's if your turn, the only time you can use quicks are during your main phase, not when you attack or after you make an attack declaration, after your opponent reacts to your things. It is literally only during the main phase, and then the quick aspect comes in when it's your opponent's turn after they attack, and then at the end of their turn and after their effects resolve. So the example for that is, let's say your opponent has a Lucifer on board and now they're going to the end of their turn and they have a proc here that says you are going to be dealt 4 damage. You're at 4. You're trying to prevent yourself from dying. You will not be able to use a Fiery Embrace, for example, to destroy the Lucifer and prevent that from killing you. That window hasn't happened yet. All effects need to resolve before you get the opportunity to be able to use a quick. Also, there is no responding. There's no such thing as a stack. There's no such thing as a chain. When you try to use a card, it must fully resolve, and then you can go ahead and use another quick. And you can chain quicks. So if it's the end of your opponent's turn and they resolved all their abilities and then your window opens up, you can use one quick. You must resolve it. Then you can use another quick. You must resolve it. And then you go from there. So there's no stacking. There's no chaining. There's no responding. It's when an effect comes on, then you must resolve it. Now, there are times when multiple effects will happen simultaneously, and then the active player can decide at which order those resolve. But in terms of cards from hand, in order to deal with something your opponent is doing, you will not have a response window. So you must think a little bit more proactively when you're thinking about when or how you should be utilizing your quick cards. Then, can I use all my evo points? And this one I mean like specifically in one go. And if you read the card, it actually answers it for you. No, it is one evo point per evo. So specifically, evo points will be able to use instead of a play point, but you can only use one on per one evo. And you can use it on turn one. So if on turn one, for whatever reason, you have something on board that you want to evo and it only costs one, then you can go ahead and use an evolution point to go ahead and prop it up. But again, there is a limit. You can only use one per evo. And at the start of the game, the only player who gets evo points is player 2. Player 1 doesn't get any. It's not like the digital game where you get 2 and your opponent gets 3. It is absolutely only a second turn player advantage, which is kind of like saying the second turn player has the bonus of having 3 extra play points at any point in the game for evos specifically. Then, last word after banish. No. Board to cemetery is the only way in which you will be able to get last word. So if it says destroy, if it removes down its defense to 0, anything that will move it from the board into the cemetery is good to go. However, banishing is not the case. So the example here, we have Bell Ringer Angel, everyone's favorite card. And for some reason, you absolutely want to get this ding dong off the board and use Blackened Scripture. Well, not only will you be able to get Bellringer Angel off the board, but because it is banished, it does not get its last word to proc, which means you will not then draw a card, which is sweet. I mean, it depending on who, right? It's sweet for the player who gets to prevent a card draw, not so sweet for the player who did not get the additional card. So that is definitely a way you can kind of work around last words. I will say banish abilities are way less common than destruction abilities. Same with like combat or anything like that, but they do exist and they are a way for you to kind of work around last words. Then, can I choose to not pay for fanfare? Absolutely. So anytime there's a cost associated to an ability, it then becomes optional. You are not required to activate any ability that has a cost. And the way you can tell that it's a cost is that in the ability, it'll have a bunch of text behind a colon. So if that exists, then at that point, you know everything before the colon is actually a cost to resolve the rest of the ability. Our example card here is Righteous Devil. So fanfare, give your leader -3 health, evolve this follower and has Bane. Now you would think, oh my God, I'm at 3 health. I can't play this card from my hand because it's going to kill me. No, that's actually not the case. You are very much welcome to just play it and not actually use its fanfare because it is an optional cost to use the ability. You do use it, then you can go ahead and do the other stuff and then go into the evolved form and get the assail and get the rush and get all that kind of stuff. But again, it is not required. And this isn't just true for fanfares. Any ability that has a cost, you can choose to not use it if you do not want to pay the cost. It automatically becomes optional, even for things that just automatically happen, like fanfares. And now we have, are there spells that ignore aura? Absolutely. So anytime a card says each instead of choose, that's when you know you're going to be able to ignore aura. Aura, of course, being the keyword that says you may not be chosen by spells. That said, we can get around it with things like Alchemical Lore, deal 4 damage to each enemy follower on the field, or Themis' Decree, destroy each follower on the field. So because it's just happening globally to the board and we're not specifically choosing targets, the cards with aura will also be impacted given these cards. And if you want additional coverage on exactly how keywords interact and kind of get the general gist of all keywords, I actually made a video up there in the corner. You can go ahead and check it out, which will break down every single keyword available in the game in the first set. And those were the general rulings that I'm seeing floating around everywhere. A lot of people asking these specific questions. I hope I was able to provide you guys some insight. And honestly, this could go on forever. There are so many like minute situations. I'm still trying to figure out the rules. The English version of the game doesn't even have a comprehensive rules text. So we just need to base ourselves off of the translations from the Japanese one, which is not great. So hopefully we get that soon. But if you guys have any specific rulings that you're unsure about, I'm sure within the next couple of weeks, I'll probably do a follow-up video just with the additionals that anyone asked. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to try to either answer there directly or include it in a future video. So with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.